Hello, it's the Patriotic Christian. I'm back, and I'm here to answer a question. Are Christians hypocrites? You know, a lot of people do wonder about that, and of course the accusation goes about all the time. But yeah, I'm just going to come right out and say it. Yes, Christians are hypocrites. But that's not a bad thing. So let me explain. So I have here the beginnings of an illustration. So we have God, who is the creator. He created everything, and he makes the rules. Okay, he sets the standard, and that's what this line represents here, is the standard that God has ordained. Now, this is the standard that everyone will be judged by, and because of sin and having, fallen from our original perfect creation, none of us can ever even hope to achieve that standard. And so a lot of people will sort of set their own standard. I've run into atheists, for example, who would object to the accusation that they don't have morality. They say, well, of course we have morality. We just sort of make up our own morality. And so I'm going to represent that here with this sort of squiggly line. I draw it in a weird squiggly way because it's more realistic in that it's an inconsistent standard. Any standard that we can come up with ourselves that, we think that this is an acceptable standard, it's going to be imperfect and, hypocritical in some regard. But, supposing they really do live up to the standard that they themselves set, it still falls very short of the real standard. Because, ultimately it doesn't matter what standard an individual decides is the moral standard. What's going to matter is if there is a creator and he did make the rules, it's going to matter what standard he has set. None of this is going to matter. So the way Christianity works and how it ends up that we're hypocrites in a sense is that we acknowledge God's standard, even knowing we can never achieve it. So whenever when we point out someone's sin or something like that, we're holding them to God's standard because that is the standard. None of us are actually claiming that we can achieve this standard. That's the whole point of the gospel and, Jesus dying for us, because we can never reach the standard ourselves. That's why God substituted himself in our place. So he took the punishment and he gave us his righteousness, so that as long as we accept that gift, then on Judgment Day, we will, in the eyes of the judge, of God, we will not only have not fallen short of this standard, but we will actually be worthy. We'll actually have met the requirement because of what Jesus did. But see, the thing is, Christians still strive to reach this standard. We know we won't reach it, but we still strive for it. And as a result, most Christians who are, doing what they should, they will have another line. It's going to be less crooked than if they make up their own morality, right? But it's still going to be imperfect because people make mistakes even in understanding what the standard is sometimes. But in the end, when it comes to matters of society and an actual practical moral standard that's actually practiced by people, Christians will score much higher than people who just make up their own morality, or people who just, adopt whatever morality suits them, which is what a lot of people do today. They just kind of do whatever they want, and they sort of create this scenario in their minds like, well, I'm a good person, so I meet my own standard kind of thing, therefore God's going to let me into heaven. But that's not how God sees it. See, God's standard is way up here, and if you're way down here, none of this is going to matter. Only this one matters. Now, Christians, of course, in this sense, we are hypocrites because we hold this standard up for everyone, but we know we can't reach it. So we end up with a standard that still falls short of God's standard, but it is still a much higher moral standard, and when it comes to society, it is better, much better, because we do achieve a higher moral standard. And so this is why I'm going to say that, yes, Christians are hypocrites in this sense, but that's not a bad thing, because if Christians weren't hypocrites, then they would set a standard down here that they know for sure they could reach, even though it's nothing close or not even trying to be close to God's real standard. So the fact that Christians are hypocrites is actually a good thing, because they're holding up the real standard as the example. And just because they don't always, measure up, in fact, they never measure up, but they often don't measure up in the eyes of worldly people and stuff. They're going to judge them by this standard, but they'll judge themselves by this other standard. And so, yes, they are also hypocrites. People who set up their own moral standard, it's subject to change and whatnot. The fact is, anyone who has any sense of morality is probably a hypocrite, because at some point they have not measured up to whatever moral standard they set, unless they are at least completely honest and just basically claim that there is no moral standard and that all they should and could do is whatever they want. It leads to a very, very decadent society, but at least it's not hypocritical, right? So if you want to be a non-hypocrite, I guess you just have to eliminate all moral standards completely, because the fact is, people make mistakes. And I hope this was helpful, and I'll catch you on the next video.